Welcome to the Self-Healing Revolution, where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. I am your host, Paige Pierman, owner of Love Yourself, an Ayurvedic and integrative wellness center based in Louisville, Kentucky. And I basically put together this summit so that people can learn about many different modalities and ways in which you can heal your body. So I've divided into three areas: biohack your body, master your mind, and elevate your soul. I'm so excited today. This interview is being done at Ammortal. I just experienced therapy on a machine called the Catalyst, and with Gwen and Jeremy. And I'd like to just go ahead and introduce both of them. Gwen Carnegie completed her MSN NP from Duke University and is board certified in family practice with the ANCC. Her passion for integrative and energy-based medicine evolved from her quest to heal after being treated for 2 different types of cancer and the residual effects of chemotherapy and radiation. Her extensive training, personal experience, and deep empathy create space for patients to realize their own healing potential. She incorporates and synergistic balance of traditional medicine and energy modalities to cultivate her patients' highest level of wellness, physical, emotionally, and spiritually. I also have with me Jeremy Stich, MD and Chief Medical Officer of Ammortal. Dr. Stich completed medical school at the University of Kentucky, is licensed in all 50 states, and has practiced emergency medicine for the past 11 years. He was compelled to pursue a higher understanding of physiology, epigenetics, and bioenergetics after being challenged by personal and family illnesses. His quest for a deeper understanding of the human body has established him as a leader in integrative, bioenergetic, and bioplasmic medicine. He founded several direct care clinics and is co-founder of Wild Health, a world-renowned genomic medicine company. He is a fellow of the American Board of Acupuncture Medicine. Thank you so much, Gwen and Jeremy, for joining us today. I also have with me my partner, Chris Whitko, who also experienced the therapies with me today. So we'll be sharing in this interview.
Great to be here, Paige. I'm excited to do this with you.
Yeah, excited to do this with all four of us.
Thank you so much for having us on. It's been wonderful to meet and spend time with both of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having us in your own house, if you will. And it sounds like both of you came from your own healing, as all of us tend to, even if we're in the medical field in some way, shape, or form, we continue to evolve through our own healing. Can you speak a little bit about that from each of your perspectives?
Goes first.
I'll take it first if you like. So I had a professional career that had nothing to do with medicine prior to being diagnosed with cancer. And in that moment, in that space within my life, I received what I would now call a calling, right? This moment of realizing that my purpose in life was beyond what I was currently living. And that to truly heal myself and help give back and heal others, I would go on this quest, this journey for seeking out the wisdom of all of the components that go into the making of a healthy individual. And initially I thought that was kind of the traditional route, right? I was like, okay, well, like I'll go to nursing school. That makes sense. Like it's an easy way for me to change my career and bridge into medicine. So completed traditional training for nursing and then nurse practitioner. And as I was along that journey of, gaining the actual clinical knowledge of that practice, I was also healing myself on a lot of different levels and becoming aware of things within me and things that contributed to my own health and well-being that I didn't really attend to fully before my diagnosis. When I completed my training, my professional training, I realized I still was missing like huge pieces of information. I felt like I was like, wait a second, like I'm an NP. I can go and see people in family practice, and yet I couldn't be a part of a system that I felt was incomplete. I knew there were missing pieces. I didn't yet know exactly what they were. I had been practicing meditation and mindfulness myself within my personal life, and felt like the bridge between intention and our energy as beings was not being integrated into the medical system, right? Like it's frequently thought of as kind of fringe medicine within the States. And there's so many other cultures that do a better job of seeing the human in its complete form. So through that seeking was like, is this genetics? Is this like, what is this missing piece that makes up for these differences that we see in whether or not people heal or people remain in disease states? And that led me to what I currently practice first as a patient. So I used PEMF therapy to recover from a lot of side effects that I had from surgery that I had to treat my cancer, which had left me really dependent on medicines to live a slightly normal life. I just felt like I don't want to do this, right? Like I don't want to be taking 10,000 milligrams of calcium a day to exist. Like there has to be a better solution to this.
Just keep piling meds. That's the solution.
Exactly. Yeah, my calcium would drop lower and you would just up my dose. So after 2 treatment sessions, 2 p.m. treatment sessions, my calcium level was normal. And it was at that point that I shifted. I still had like a fairly heavy clinical mindset where I wanted evidence. I wanted like lab values and measurements to know what I like felt within myself. So having that data, that irrefutable data of this is the only intervention that I've made. I'm now 8 years post cancer treatment, like nothing else has changed besides adding this treatment modality with the intention of healing, and had some pretty substantial shifts. So I was like, this is something that I now want to dedicate my professional career to helping other people receive and have the ability to heal themselves.
You said something interesting, with the intention to heal. You kind of emphasized that. Do you see that was part of the healing experience? What do you mean by that?
So I think, our mind creates matter. So our energetic intention, our thought, can pave new pathways within our physical body and our energetic body. So having a modality to help pave those pathways with the intention of healing myself, of, I don't want to say an endpoint because it very much is not an endpoint, right? But having a goal in mind, knowing that there was something more to contribute to my healing and seeking that out, open doorways that, I don't know, I hadn't explored before.
Yeah, I think of it as the lens, right? You can take a therapy that works really well, and the research shows us that, if a patient or a client believes in a therapy, it's more likely to work. It also shows that, to a lesser extent, the belief of the practitioner influences that. So I think that there's some sort of lens that we use with our intention that helps whatever modality either be more or less effective depending on our mindset. And we know that. I mean, there's a lot of literature that points to mindset as being extremely important. I think it's to set that intention ahead of time and actually apply it towards a very specific goal allows us to get very directional with it.
Yeah, it amplifies the therapy or the clinical treatment plan. When we have an intention, there's an extra amount of placebo effect that can come online when the intention, and I love that you say not just the intention of the patient or the client, but the intention of the practitioner too, especially when it's involving energy healing, because we bring to it our own mindset, right? Just like the person on the table has their mindset, there's the mindset and power of the clinician as well. So Jeremy, yeah.
I was a total skeptic, actually. As you say, it's a good transition. Like when I was taught about this type of medicine, I was super clinical mindset at the time. I was like running a fellowship program, teaching about 200 clinicians a year, serving as the operational director of this genetics company. thinking that I'm on the cutting edge of medicine, right? When I go in and see this guy and he's like, hey, you've got a blockage in your neck. It's probably from stress. And that's why you have high blood pressure. Okay, I get it. You from Adam, I'm flown across the country to see you. But I'm here, so let's have at it. And I remember like releasing that thing. He literally used the PEMF therapy to apply this like manual myofascial release that what I now realize was opening up the vagus nerve and regulating my autonomics. But at the time, I was in like complete and utter disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it's very similar to you. You have the real-time biofeedback of your own body that's telling you like this is working. And I felt this release. And for the first time, I took a big deep breath, did that slow exhale, and I was like, well, crap. And now I have to go back to the drawing board, because what I knew still had a lot of value. It still carried a lot of knowledge, but it was incomplete. It didn't have that other piece of how our bioenergetic or bioelectrical system, which is our autonomic nervous system, runs and governs our body. That's sort of in my opinion, that's that dovetail where the East and West philosophy meet.
I have a quick question. And then, so you said you were a skeptic. What was the moment at which that skepticism moved over into belief, from skeptic to belief? What was that final moment?
That's what I was going to ask too.
Yeah.
It's like here you are in the medical field, everything's clinical, everything's research or evidence-based. And now all of a sudden you have this miraculous thing. Like that shift is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had the frying pan moment, you call it, right?
Yeah.
I took a lot of frying pans to the face before I actually I'm a little bit resilient in that way. We'll call it resilient because that's a positive spin. So it was a journey. Like at first, I've always been sort of drawn to this naturally as a way to recover, but I never actually considered it part of the clinical practice. When I started seeing outcomes, I became curious, right? I went on the spiritual retreat, had been studying a lot of physics and just understanding how energetics and biology interact. And during the retreat, I had this, I don't know what else you'd call it, but a vision where I could sort of see things as quantum physics explains that they are, like so united, like as one system. And I could see the link between, myself and the other person in the other room, and myself and the environment that I was in, the world. And for the first time in my life, I was like, oh, holy crap, like this is real. So that gave me a very different perspective, like coming out of that experience when I didn't take energetics seriously, other than recreational use, to actually seeing, okay, there's a reality to this, and studying that quantum physics and that deep physics approach in a more meaningful way. Mm-hmm. That was like the light bulb moment, that there's something here that we're missing, or that I was missing, at least in my training.
Yes, I know we're probably thinking
We were
the same
like,
thing.
go ahead, go ahead.
Well, so what was it about the quantum physics approach, or maybe, I don't know if this is your question, what was it about that approach that also the light bulbs began to click from a scientific, because again, coming from a skeptic, coming from a scientific mindset, what were the things that were like, okay, I see the science in this now, because, this is, the summit's about self-healing, where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. And I think people really want to hear the science to trust it, to believe in it.
Yeah, like you.
Yeah.
Totally. I don't know. That's so tough, because it was a journey. Like it was one of skepticism to curiosity to acceptance, and getting into the physics, I think that was the one way I could explain what a lot of the ancient traditions and ancient therapies were doing that connected to my allopathic world, right? When I don't want to diss allopathic medicine, because it's done a lot of great things. If somebody gets in a car wreck, or there's an emergency, or somebody has an appendix that needs to come out, like there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
Totally.
In a first world country with good access to healthcare, right? because that's a physical problem. You need physical removal. But we kind of miss the boat when it comes to the long-term chronic health conditions, right? And understanding the physics helped me understand where things like acupuncture was actually believing that electrical system, what they call, the governor that runs the body, which is autonomics. One of my instructors explained this is sort of like the yin and the yang, sympathetic and parasympathetic tone, turning them up and down would help regulate certain organs, and thus that would shift the way that blood and nutrients were delivered to those organs, which would change the way they recover or don't recover. And all of a sudden, the light bulb again goes off and it's like illuminates the physiology. It made sense for the first time.
And I don't want to speak for you, but I think like feeling the shift and seeing the shift in your own blood pressure after having that treatment, like realizing like, okay, hold on a second, this is actually like measurably working and changing something. What is the mechanism behind how this works? Like that led you to seek out kind of a better understanding of this physics behind how these modalities affect health.
And it gets down to the fact that we're energetic beings. And we were talking a little bit about that, Jeremy and I, during the treatment. I know you had your treatment with Gwen and I had mine with Jeremy. And we were talking a little bit about the electrical nature of our bodies. And just talk a little bit about that and why do you think these modalities work and the fact that we are electric beings.
Yeah. So one of the theories, and I'll say like it's a theory at this point, but it's a pretty good one, is that when you look at an atom, what you're actually looking at is mostly empty space, right? You've got protons, you've got neutrons in the middle, and then you've got this electron cloud or field, or maybe actually a particle. That's up for debate, right? So of that mass, like way less than 1% is actually matter. The rest is an electrical field potential between these different states of energy. So, I mean, just simply looking at that, one has to at least consider the possibility that the energetics make up a big component of who we are.
Which that in and of itself is pretty mind-blowing because you tap a table and you feel your body, you're like, wait a minute, how's it 99% nothing? It's that itself is kind of out there in a sense. Of course, anyone who saw What the Bleep or any of this stuff, they all, this is reverberated. So we know that this is true.
So when you received your first PEMF therapy and you had the physical symptoms becoming resolved, how did you begin to understand PEMF and begin to create your own prototype for healing?
Yeah, we see the prototypes, and we reiterated, this is not like our inventions. In fact, they've been around for over 100 years, right? This is all recycled technology. And it goes back, there's like something called the Flexner Report, where like basically the funding was shifted towards pharmaceuticals and acute interventions. And it happened to coincide with the Depression. So what we did is we looked at that research and sort of picked it up. I remember you and I were at like a brunch in Baltimore.
Yep.
And we're looking through all these old textbooks and you're like, check this out, check this out. Treating like hearing loss with electronics. It was wild. And that was part of a standard med school textbook.
Yeah, specifically magnetic field therapy. So it was basically an encyclopedia, a manual, so to speak, of all the different diseases and the protocols of using these devices, pulsed electromagnetic field devices, to treat things from skin cancer to breast tumors to depression and anxiety. It was like hundreds of different diagnoses that they were utilizing these approaches to treating. I was like, wait a second, this is not new. Like we're not inventing something here that's never been used before. We're simply bringing something back to the light that was kind of squashed out of traditional allopathic medicine.
And I had a question earlier to that, which was, why do you think that is? I'm just curious. You've both been in the kind of the standard allopathic model. and they don't address, the idea that the thought forms of the practitioner, can affect the outcomes. And of course, energy medicine is hardly used unless they're doing an MRI or something, which they use MRIs all the time. So they know there's electrical, we're electric beings, but outside of that, it's almost ignored. Why do you guys think that is?
It takes a long time to adopt something. So when and ethically, this is probably, you could arguably call this a good thing, that if we're going to start something new and potentially treat a human being with it, we want to respect the sanctity of that human life. So there's a little bit of a reluctance to accept new things because we don't want to cause harm. It's the first line of the Hippocratic Oath. I think that there's probably other influences too, because, the system that it's set up sort of really emphasizes hard research, and intention is tough to research. It's tough to research somebody's mindset, right? We know it intuitively when we walk into a room and we're like, oh, this guy's a fighter, this person's I remember that feeling many, many times in training, but it's also hard to study. And then I think the last part of it is just reality. It's the funding. You only have a certain amount of monies that can go towards studying a certain thing. And, through, some people think it's ill will. I think a lot of it's just the natural evolution of it's easier to study in acute therapy and watch it before and after than it is to kind of go in and do the deep dive.
I think the reason that acute therapies are so much easier to study is because it's so obviously there's a big punch to the system. It's like a pharmaceutical is very, very different than an herb. I mean, I've had an herbalist on here, and it's because it's acute, it's very obvious. Whereas with these things, they can be more subtle, and so it's not as obvious right away. It's interesting because there's been a trend, not only like you were talking about PEMF therapy, but even, and on the summit we had, I don't mean to divert, but psychedelics were used for mental health, and that's reemerging. Naturopathy and homeopathy is reemerging. Ayurveda is reemerging. So, I believe there's this now open mindset occurring to look at this and actually start to research it, but without diverting too much. So, like you said, you weren't inventing this as brand new. It was already there. However, you have found a way to really amplify it when we just experienced the catalyst. Can you speak more about, okay, so you understood that PEMF therapy would work, and then how did you begin to understand how to create a model that would be so potent, I guess you should say, or I just experienced the therapy, and it's very obvious to me that it's working. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. Do you want to tackle that one? Or you want me to?
You can take the first part of it, and then I'll
So,
the tail end.
So the first thing I'll say, there's lots of really good devices out there, and they all are effective, and they're all effective in their different ways, right? We had to take sort of a fresh approach. We looked at the body, and we had to take a stand. I think of it as a line in the sand, which was basically, do we think that we have to tell the body how to heal, or do we think that there is innate ability to heal itself? And it wasn't really hard when you put millions of years into research, evolution, and realize that the human body's been around for quite a long time, and there's probably more wisdom inherent in the body naturally than our modern medical approach would give credit for. So we kind of banked on the idea that if we give the body the right ingredients, that it would come up with its own recipe. And this is very, very different than doing the other way around, which is giving the body the ingredients and the recipe, saying you're going to use these and you're going to heal in this way.
So with a lot of the other PEMF devices that are on the market right now, they work in that recipe type format where you're saying, okay, this person has hypertension, I'm going to set it to this setting, and they're exposed to these set frequencies that are predetermined to be most beneficial for the condition that you're looking to treat. Now, the upside of that is that they're effective in treating the condition you're looking to treat. The downside is that people usually aren't really aware of the host of things going on inside of their body, right? They're physically maybe most aware of like where they have the most pain or discomfort, but that's like just scratching the surface, and the true underlying cause of that may be wildly different than what they think. So the benefit of using a tech modality that applies that whole spectrum of frequencies is that the body can pick and choose what it needs. We're not sitting there saying, okay, this is what we're delivering you. These are the frequencies that you have the opportunity to absorb and use.
And we got really focused and asked you, what does frequency mean? It's the frequency, how many signals are received in a certain period of time. And the way that that's actually interpreted by the body is that's data, right? You have a carrier, which in this case is electricity, and then you have data, which are the frequencies. And the body speaks different languages because we are meant to be out in nature. We have evolved for many, many, many years as humans out in nature, the full spectrum of sun's light and all of the other electromagnetic waves that we receive from radio all the way up to some gamma. So we always assume these things are like good and bad, but the reality is we probably are meant to get tiny doses of all of them. This is no different than heavy metals. Like we have tiny doses of heavy metals in our body that we need just a little tiny bit of, but if we take too much of it, so
yeah. Go ahead.
We don't want to replicate all that, but we did want to put the natural frequencies that a human body that's out in nature, as though they were forest bathing, was going to be exposed to. And that's sort of how we bake that into this set of data. We've got a really, really smart CEO who understands the whole product chain and how to make something in an intelligible way that can be scaled down and ultimately delivered in a really useful way.
So let's get into what this exact thing we just did. So, and I understand what you say about kind of putting all the frequencies of nature into the device. So we held on to a little kind of a vacuum tube of sorts. Looks like one of those, things from Tesla, the Tesla pictures where they walk around with those crazy tubes and all this static is going off. And we held on to that. And so we got kind of, we had a lot of frequencies coming into our bodies. Our feet were grounded. And so our hands held the device. And I could feel the static. It was very kind of staticky or like a little static electricity. So I could feel the energy just flowing through. So can you explain a little bit about what was going on in our bodies in your understanding of how that heals and how that can affect diseases or whatever?
Totally. So that globe carries a small microcurrent, and it takes this relatively large voltage and it converts that large voltage into a small current and many, many, many different frequencies. So that static that you're describing, you're feeling the shift in the many frequencies. It's little tiny vibrations. And if you think about how the body's nervous system works, we basically transfer signal up and down nerves using these ion gradients. So you take that carrier current that you're holding onto, small amperage, with all the frequencies that are essentially vibrating molecules and cellular cell membranes into their proper alignment. There's actually a term for this. It's called electroporation. So that current literally makes holes in the phospholipid bilayer, which is basically like a liquid crystal matrix. And because there's a current driving, it drives ions in and out of the cells to follow their natural gradient to restore what's called a resting membrane potential. So effectively, you've got ions moving in the same direction as the currents, restoring cells to their native membrane potential. So if you came in and you had, tissues that were like devitalized and worn out, like, thyroid might be down here or whatever, we're restoring that to its natural rhythm, and we do that with hands-on. We do our licenses.
So I have a question. So we were holding, I call it a globe. So we're holding the globe in our hands. And then after I held it for say 20 minutes or so, then Gwen came in and did some hands-on healing to me. Have people themselves, I was wanting to experiment on myself in there, have people themselves, like other than the hands being the mechanism to transport this through the body. I mean, granted, you did it on your hands when you came and worked on me with the hands-on therapy, but have people taken the globes and like themselves like worked on different parts of their body, or when you train people to work on themselves? Because I was like tempted, I started putting it, over different chakra areas, just out of experimentalness myself. So I know that when the practitioner is working on you, they use their hands, but when you're training people and they're doing this in their own homes, can they move the globe around just so it's not just only coming in through your hands, into your system?
Yes, yep, you can absolutely apply the globe to different places of the body. I also think something that's very effective that you had brought up as you were doing your solo charging was you had a specific area of your body that you were feeling discomfort in. You'd been spending a lot of time at your desk and doing computer work, which you had said was not your normal way that you spend your time. And through focusing where you would like that energy to move to open back up, you had experienced some relief within that area. So it's not all just physical placement, right? Like, yes, you can use the globe and press at different places on your body, but there's also a profound shift that can happen just through where we are consciously moving that energy within ourselves.
I love that. That's a very yogic tantric concept. I mean, it's like, if we want to heal ourselves, and even in Reiki, if we want to heal ourselves, we just bring the focus or the awareness and intention to that area of the body. And like you said, the power of the mind, or again, going back to intention, what we just spoke about, it will inevitably, where our mind goes, energy flows, so it inevitably will happen that way. So,
and we could talk about the theory behind everything a lot too, but you guys have had real experiences here with people, and it's almost like that's all that really matters in the end of the day, is what are the experiences people having. And Gwen was, you were trying to heal for 8 years, and suddenly with this energy medicine, everything shifted. So what are some of the other stories of people's healings that you've experienced here?
Testimonials of other profound experiences.
There's a ton. I mean, we were on the Ben Greenfield show not too long ago. We talked about a couple of people, and Gwen talked about her experience. We got to be respectful of people's privacy, but there's been some cool ones. One thing I did want to comment on, personal experience does really matter, but so does data, and data speaks. And it's important to put those two things together. So one of the early epiphanies that we had was like, okay, these one-off experiences are awesome. We need to document them. We need to be like tracking, people with cancer and their response to it. So, we're in the process of that, but we also needed to start some trials. So, the first one was looking at cognitive function, executive function, and an objective cognitive tool that literally is measuring different EEG waves that are sort of standards in the industry, and looking at how fast and how efficiently neurons or groups of neurons are fired. So we've got that thing cooking right now.
Awesome.
I think we finished the planning phase, and starting in 2023, they're actually recruiting patients with our partners up in Vancouver, actually Surrey, not Vancouver, Surrey, Canada. And they're affiliated with some major universities. So we have to collect all of those things, the personal experiences, the case reports, plus the data collection, because it's all really important. And we don't want what happened 150 years ago to happen again, where it just gets dropped.
And if you have the evidence, it's a lot harder to dismiss it, because it's easy to say, oh, no, it's all placebo or whatever. But if you have this evidence that you're lining up, it's like, no, this is the data. This is what's happening.
Well, I think too, like for me, ultimately, I would love to see more of a bridge and a connection between alternative therapies and traditional medicine, or what's thought of as traditional medicine now. And I think for practitioners who are traditionally trained, they need that evidence to be able to make the steps towards integrating these types of things into their practice. And I understand why. Like it wasn't very long ago that I was standing there going like, but does this really work? Like, please show me the studies. Like, I remember the first time I came in for treatment, I had sent Jeremy a message and I was like, could you send me like some clinical trial data, or like, where has this been studied or whatever? And he's like, well, there's some stuff on like breast cancer research and anxiety and depression in Europe. And I was like, hey, but what about for like hypoparathyroidism? Like, is this indicated? It was, but my mind needed that data to be able to make the leap. So I think my goal as a practitioner within this space is not just to talk about like the the unmeasurable of it, which very much is part of it, but also to bridge that gap between how do we make these therapies something that are approachable to doctors in modern medicine, like doctors doing family practice or endocrinology, where they would think of this as a reasonable treatment modality to help their patients achieve health. So it is important, like, collecting that data is something that is important for us.
Collecting data, explaining the bridge. The bridge is the physics, right? So we've got, you alluded to this earlier, Chris, the diagnostics in medicine right now are based off of quantum physics and energy, but the therapies are not. So there's a mismatch, right? But that's a great bridge to explain to doctors. So when you're going through an MRI, you're looking at the state of the hydrogen ions in one state and another that's shifted based on a giant electromagnetic signal, right? Oh, ding, 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 like we're looking at energy. And yet when we apply that, we're applying it very allopathically. So we can go to the physics, which is really interesting. I was reading the Tao of Physics this morning, and the author's talking about how these ancient philosophies, religions, and practices basically all kind of spoke back to this unity of matter as into one in a very esoteric teaching. And yet now modern physics is teaching us the same thing in a very scientific way. So these two things are coming together, and it's a great bridge to explain and apply the therapy. And then all of a sudden you have an explanation for why something like acupuncture or forest bathing or meditation works. And there's good enough evidence to say, we know it activates things epigenetically, it regulates over 500 genes, but we have a why, right? That's helpful.
Absolutely. I love what you both have said, because, I believe wholeheartedly that if we brought the ancient wisdom and the modern science together, we would have the best of acute-based care, but then we would have the best of preventative medicine. We would have the best of looking at preventing disease from happening in the first place. We would have the ability to begin to look at longevity in a new way. We would begin to look at optimization of the body versus just managing our symptoms, but really getting into how do we optimize all aspects of our being in health optimization. I think there's a tendency to think, okay, well, I'm not diseased, I'm not sick, but I'm not living optimally. I don't feel great. I'm tired. I have low energy. There's a difference between just managing and feeling fully optimal. And I believe if we could marry these two, it would be a perfect blend. And I believe we're moving in that direction, maybe slowly, maybe quickly, not so sure. So
I was just going to add, the approach like Gwen was saying, instead of trying to find a specific frequency for a specific thing, it's like we're looking at overall wellness. So if we're giving the body everything it needs, and as you said earlier, the innate wisdom of the body knows what to do, feed it all the information, all the nutrition from energy nutrition or whatever, and it can take what it needs to take and heal and optimize. I like your word, optimize it all.
Yeah, I want to speak still a little bit, so we've talked about quantum physics, but what do you all, because this was just something that Gwen, we had emailed back and forth, what do you believe is happening on the cellular level? You spoke a little bit about that, but you are having people that are coming in, obviously, with some more serious disease-based conditions. Do you believe that there's some cellular cleansing happening? Obviously you're charging the body, but then when we look at the mitochondria and we look at booting up the energy of the body, what do you all see happening in terms of mitochondria, in terms of cellular repair? Do you have any science on that yet, or at least a sense of what's happening?
I mean, I have a hypothesis as to what's happening. I cannot provide irrefutable proof as to this is exactly how this is working. So when we talk about diseased tissue, we're talking about tissue that has lost its negative charge. So its resting membrane potential is becoming less polarized. So it's becoming more positively charged. So rather than having a resting membrane potential of -15 and -70 millivolts, you're looking at more 10 to 15 in severely diseased states like cancer. So by providing the body with the foundational energy, the hypothesis is that you're restoring or helping to restore those cells, their energetic potential, back to being more negatively charged, which then allows them to communicate better with their neighbors, to not go into like aberrant behavior of holy cow, scarcity mode, let's make like a zillion of us. And then you see things like cancer growth happen. So although I cannot prove that that's what's happening, personally, that is my belief. And I do think, you know, when you look at devices that have been FDA approved for treatment of different types of cancer, like there's a device that's used for treatment of stage 4 glioblastoma, the PEMF device. That is my understanding of how that technology works as well.
And there is some good evidence. I mean, you can't stick probes on every single cell, measure the electron gradient. It's just physically impossible at this stage in the game. There's definitely good evidence with disease, especially in cancer, where they do that in vivo during surgery, and they're measuring, you know, the clinicians are measuring in real time the electron gradient. You can also see evidence of this in terms of cellular morphology. So a healthy cell tends to be more round in nature when they're not, like, you know, squished and held in a certain position. They tend to be more round in nature. As that voltage changes, it actually shifts the polarity so that they're shaped a little bit more oblong, more like a football. And there are devices that can even detect that. So we're kind of in the early stages of experimenting with that. That's, I think, one of the proposed projects that you were really passionate about. I mean, working with some guys out of Israel to how to design that study and how to actually track like bloodborne cancers, and then do it before and after.
So you're saying how the energy levels dip, the potential across the membrane, and that is kind of like the essence of any disease. Is the first kind of thing that happens with anyone is they lose energy. They even feel like they feel less energy. And that's kind of like a hallmark of all diseases. So the idea that, you know, the root of a lot of this is just the energy levels of the cells are degrading. Then they can't transport the nutrients in and out of the cells. They can't transport the waste out of the cells efficiently. All this requires energy. And as soon as the energy potential across those membranes goes down to a certain degree, I can only imagine that all these important functions that the cells doing to keep us in optimal health are just not able to do it. There's just not enough energy. So being able to just absolutely push the energy gradients of these membranes back up to where they need to be, that seems like a fundamental concept for health to me.
We've seen it, I know we're running short on time, but we've seen that in patients who do a lot and invest a lot in their health. They put all the right ingredients, they work out, they get sleep and stuff. But sometimes they just don't have the catalyst, right, to get them over the hump, to take that A plus B equals C reaction, because it takes a little bit of energy before it releases energy. So you supply the system with a bit of energy, no different than our high school physics experiments or high school chemistry experiments, where you wind up with a different compound.
I love that idea.
So again, I know you have a theory. What do you think is happening on the mitochondrial level? Again, because I think of that as like truly the battery operator of our system. I mean, can you explain what your theory is around what might be happening with mitochondria?
Yeah. So I think of the electron transport chain almost like a rotor that gets turned and is churning out electricity, right? So with the device, for instance, you're taking an electrical signal, turning it into a kinetic signal. That kinetic signal is resonance that drives ions in and out, and that is then converted back into energy in the terms of an energy gradient. So you're turning electric energy, kinetic energy, into potential energy that's stored as electricity within the body. And this shouldn't surprise us too much. Our body is estimated to have like 10,000 volts per square meter. It's a lot of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
We joke with people like, I could zap you with the later. But it shouldn't be too surprising then that that's the same type of mechanism in the mitochondria as it would be on the rest of the cellular membranes. The theory of mitochondria are symbiotic things that learn to live within our cells and then became part of us, right? So you're essentially talking about the same kind of thing, but
Okay.
Mitochondrial level, you're talking about either electron or electron fields or clouds, and then cell, you're talking about ions.
Okay.
And what you were talking about on the cellular level, I think about also for hearts, when the heart stops, they put a defibrillator, which just a volt of, electricity, then it just starts. It's like that's the catalyst, right? It's kind of like stagnant, it's not beating. You hit it with electricity, and now it can function again.
Mhm. Yeah. So would you all like to speak about the catalyst, the chamber, just the products that you all have created, and when these tools will be out to the public? I know that.
And when can we get one?
Yeah, I know that you've had a lot of attention lately, and it's been fast and furious to get them out to the public. But can you share a little bit? I'm sure that there'll be many listeners curious to learn more.
Oh, thanks. You want to start?
Yeah, sure. I can start with the chamber because that's coming out the soonest. So the chamber is the highest end offering that we have in our product lineup, and it combines a whole bunch of different modalities into one device. So it looks like this bed, like this zero gravity bed that you lay in. It has PEMF technology, infrared, vibroacoustic therapy, guided meditation. It's molecular hydrogen. Yeah. So it is like the all-in-one, like you go into a session on this that is not practitioner assisted. So it's solo flying, kind of climb in, and you are just bathed in all of these different energy modalities. It's transformative. I think part of the guided meditation being in there is really, really cool. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from people who are doing demos on the first unit that it's like mind blowing. So that will release, I think our first shipment will be out kind of end of January is what our target date is at the moment. We'll have one in clinic second week of January is when we'll start booking people in on that. The next one in the lineup would be the Catalyst, and that's what we use today. And that is designed for more like solo use at home, or working on other family members, or in clinic doing practitioner assisted therapy like what we did today. That is just pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And it also has a small microcurrent, so you can qualify it as a microcurrent device as well. And then I'll let you take the last. Oh, sorry. And that one is end of Q1. So kind of end of March is what we're looking like on deliverable date for that.
And then, so those kind of hit the big frequencies that we talked about, that frequency spectrum. And there's another device that we're hoping to launch in Q2. It's a giant modified Tesla coil that pulses out a wireless PEMF signal. And that thing is like a 7-foot tall-ish coil. We're kind of limited on supply chain right now, as every single business in the world is. We're aiming for Q2 on that. So we'll see.
So how, again, because you're not holding a globe, can you speak to how the coil works within the environment? Does it affect like people's cell phones or computers? Like if people were to have it in their workspace, or have it, obviously in healing spaces would make sense, right? Or in medical spaces, but does it have any effect on devices?
Yeah, so touch screens and mouse pads. So within about a 5 to 6 foot radius, you're going to get some funny kind of electrophysics that happen.
Wow.
With the keyboard. Beyond that, not so much. So we have it in like a little reclining area, partitioned off with like a nice quiet drape in the waiting room. And what it's doing is it's actually using this current at the bottom, this high voltage current that's creating a small torus, a small field that basically pulls up the electromagnetic field from the earth through a bigger tube, and then that resonates in a bigger torus. So you're effectively just pulsing out those earth fields,
Wow.
plus the frequencies that are generated through the interactions of different metals vibrating at different frequencies.
And what square, like how far does that extend out? Or so if somebody were to have this within their space, how far does that actually extend?
I think somewhere between 80 and 100 feet. Now, mind you, the closer one is, the bigger effect one gets. The further away one gets, the lesser the effect.
Wow, it's exciting to think that people could have these like in work environments all over the country, all over the world, because people are obviously not able to get out in nature when they're working their 9-to-5 job. They're not able to benefit from all these electromagnetic fields that we get from earthing and forest bathing. And so I think these therapies are so important in this modern world that we're living in right now, because people don't have full access, to always be out in nature. Obviously, you can hike on the weekend or whatever, but in most people's 9-to-5 daily lives, they're depleting,
We're not living naturally. So we've got to supplement. We've got to supplement our energy.
Supplement, yeah.
There's some evidence out there that the Earth's geomagnetic field has actually weakened over the last 250 or so years. And the literature I've seen has said it used to be around 2.5 Gauss, and now it's like as low as 0.5. Now, I don't know where that's been measured, and that's a hard thing unless you have people that are set out to prove that. But anecdotally, it kind of makes sense that the Earth's health has shifted as we've shifted and as it's evolved, and there's all sorts of astrophysics that go into the equation as well.
So with these devices, these different energy devices, we can supplement what we naturally would have gotten 200 years ago by walking barefoot or with leather or conductive shoes through the forest on the Earth.
Well, I know we're coming up on our time. I do want to just give my personal testimonial, just because we're here and we had the opportunity to interview with you all today. And I had a general sense of what it would feel like. I did come in with some neck, shoulder, kind of, probably my fascia being tight, muscular from being on the computer a lot. And I can say that I felt it just kind of unravel during the treatment. And I felt much more relaxed and that peace within my body, and almost, like my nervous system got a nice letdown effect, just like, okay, I can really drop into this therapy. And the pain just started to dissipate from where there was tension from my occiput down in my shoulder. So I just wanted to give my own personal testimonial. Would you like to share anything?
Yeah, what she said, plus when Jeremy did he was the conductor, like I held the globe and he was the, kind of conductor, like where he was touching, depending on where the areas were. And I know I know where my issues are because I'm dealing with them every day. But when he touched certain issues, like, the electrical feeling changed.
Absolutely.
And it was instantaneous. It was like direct feedback, direct validation and verification. And he's like, oh, right here. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, right there. I know. And then it would like really, like, I could feel that the difference. I don't even know how to describe the sensation. It was unlike any sensation I've ever had.
It felt like a wave to me. So it felt like it was the muscle was like lifting and then releasing. It felt like it was like a rise and then a drop. Like there was this like moment of like lift. And then the coolest thing is when Gwen went over my pineal gland in my head. And I don't know if you got your head experience, but I felt like literally like a light bulb was just like going off. Like I felt like my head turned into a light bulb. It was a really cool experience. So thank you all for allowing us to experience the therapies today. And I definitely felt pulsation and relaxation and just much more clean afterwards. So,
and it's a real gift what you guys are doing, and you're basically dedicating your life to this mission. And it's so beautiful that you have such a powerful testimony of a powerful clinical background that you guys can speak to the most skeptic. I'm an electrical engineer, so it's like there's a lot of, I like to see data. I like to nerd out on the quantum physics as well. And I think that's important. I think to really have the studies, to have what you guys are doing, to have, with this, what we want to see is the merging.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we seeing this kind of technology in the healing, in the hospitals where they can use both? So I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing. It's exciting to see where this is going.
Yeah, and I can't wait to bring a catalyst and hopefully a chamber into my own practice, and very excited about being able to share this more widely with everyone, and even through this interview. So thank you so much.
Is there any last things you guys
anything you want to say before we end?
Gosh, no, I'm just really grateful for sharing the time with you guys. It was a pleasure. It was really interesting and stimulating to have conversation and having an opportunity to do this interview. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and I would say we don't necessarily consider ourselves experts, so we're looking for other people with similar mindset to help contribute to this movement, because we see it happening and we know it's effective.
Well, I mean, and obviously this is outside of the interview, but as I use it in my own practice, I would be happy if there's a way of disclosure and to share data to help support you all as well. I'd be very interested in driving the data forward. So,
Right.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so
Have
much.
a great day.
You too.